To avoid problems this holiday season, FAA's new administrator says the Pentagon is opening up military airspace above the Gulf to free up areas for commercial flights to use. But what else is different now so we can avoid a repeat of last year's chaos, no matter the weather?
Well, two things have changed. One is the overall performance of the system.
Pete Buttigieg is the Secretary of Transportation.
If we look at some of the summer holidays this year, they brought some of the busiest air travel days ever recorded, and a pretty low rate of cancellations and delays, certainly compared to last year, when we saw really unacceptable delay and cancellation rates from airlines that were not expecting the speed of the economic recovery that had so many people buying airline tickets in 2022. The other thing that has changed, and it's very important for passengers to know this, is that we have expanded passenger protections and passenger rights. Compared to a year and a half ago, there are dramatically more protections in terms of enforceable agreements. That means if the airline doesn't do the right thing, we can follow up and make sure they do. Around things like making sure they pay for your hotel or ground transportation or meals if they're responsible for you getting stranded. Those protections are laid out online at FlightRSgov. So those are the two big things that are improving. One, the performance of the system. Two, protections for what to do when you encounter a problem. Of course, there's more work to do, and we're working on that every day here at the DOT.
Well, to that point, in light of all the close calls at our airports, I know the FAA put together this group, the National Airspace Safety System Review Team. The report was out last week, 52 pages, right? It highlights aging technology used by the FAA, but also this shortage of air traffic controllers, really impacting not just big cities, but across the country. What are you guys doing about this? Were you anticipating this report? Have you been working on this regardless of this report?
Yes, we commissioned this report because we thought it was important to have an outside, independent look at all of the things that are necessary to keep aviation at its exceptionally safe level in the U.S. And as the safety review team pointed out, there are a number of things that have to happen, and frankly, a number of things that have to change in order to maintain and build on that security and safety record. You mentioned in your question a couple important things. One is technology. You can't just sit still with the technology you've got. We've got to modernize technology and equipment. That does have a cost, but that cost is an investment in the safety of our passengers and the strength of a system that's also very important to our economy. Second is the human factor, and the most important part of our whole system, which is the people who make it go. That includes our air traffic controller workforce, and it's why we have stepped up hiring. Now, after getting this review back, our newly confirmed FAA Administrator, Mike Whitaker, immediately took a number of steps to help on those fronts.
What do you say hiring? When you say you're working on hiring, what is that? Is that in effect now? Like, are we trying to hire more air traffic controllers right now? Because it sounds like there are a lot of industries that are saying they need workers and are having trouble finding them.
Yes, so we hired another 1,500 workers in the last fiscal year. If Congress funds us to do so, we'll be planning to hire at least another 1,800 in the coming year. And we're going to have to continue to accelerate past that. As you can imagine, this is not the kind of job you can just walk in off the street and get a couple weeks training and go do it.
We've all seen Pushing 10.
Yeah, this is a very complex and intense training process where you have to train not just generally to be an air traffic controller, but specifically in the geography, the airspace that you're going to be working. But one of the other initiatives that our new administrator, Mike Whitaker, is leading is expanding our capacity to do that training. We have a phenomenal facility in our Air Traffic Control Academy located in Oklahoma. But we're also building out partnerships with other institutions like colleges and universities that have a lot of technical training that they do to have that augment our ability to get people qualified to our very high standards.
Last year, we had the Southwest airline issue, right? And part of that was aging technology, but also, scheduling issues, right? Like where flight attendants and where staff live, where they could get to. But then shortly after that, in January, we had, the NOTAM system, which is obviously that's government technology, right? That's the FAA, and that's the system that notifies pilots about their flights and their destinations, the conditions, right? And that system went out. I guess what sort of changes then have you guys made in terms of that technology modernization that you talked about? Are we good? Like, are we not going to have an issue like that anymore? Or was that human error?
Well, this is a continuing issue because we have a number of systems that need to be upgraded. You're right. When an airline has an issue, like a technology issue, we hold them accountable for fixing it. When the FAA has a systems issue, we hold ourselves accountable for fixing it. The challenge we're having, of course, is getting the funding in place. It takes funding to improve these systems. These are some of the most complex systems you can imagine, and they have to be operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I would say, though, that those systems are worth it. Look, about 5% of our GDP depends on the aviation sector. And when we invest in modernizing and overhauling the NOTAM system or any of the other technologies that we use to move air traffic and to keep people safe, that really is an investment in our economy and an investment in the most important thing of all, which is safety.
You know, for years, we were not told about weather and technology and ATC issues when we flew over the holidays. We were talking more about security concerns, terrorist concerns. What's changed for the DOT since, October 7th? That we've been hearing from the FBI director, the terrorist threat level has increased not just from lone actors, but from possibly terrorist organizations on our own soil. Has there been a new level of communication between DOT and Homeland Security in the past month?
Well, it's important for everybody to know the extraordinary and excellent work that goes into the security side led by the Department of Homeland Security. The TSA was created as a result of 9/11. In fact, in many ways, so was the Department of Homeland Security itself. All of the things that America learned then and in the 20 plus years since have gone into making sure that our skies are safe. Anytime there is a specific threat, it will be addressed. I want to be clear that while there are, of course, a lot of things going on in the world that have added to concerns about the security picture, there has not been any specific threat that we have that we've been called to respond to based on what they're seeing. But if there is, anytime there will be swift action to deal with it.
I have to ask you before I let you go, because a lot of us are traveling not by plane, but by car. And this administration is pushing us to drive EVs. And I know you were at that congressional hearing, you testified a couple months ago. And one congressman from Minnesota, Mr. Stauber, really pressed you on this notion of what are his constituents to do in freezing temperature when your battery life is impacted in your car. And I know that an EV battery is also impacted by hotter temperatures as well. I'm wondering, what's the pitch to us to drive EVs when most of us live in places where temperatures do get hot and do get cold? Is the battery life gonna hang?
Yeah, look, I live in a very northern climate too. I live in northern Michigan, and we have cold winters and warm summers. So if you got an EV with a battery life of, let's say, 300 miles, and you have severe impacts, which means its range goes down to maybe 150 miles or 200 miles, and you drive more than 150 miles every day, then an EV might not be for you. But for most people, for most trips, most Americans are finding that it tends to work for them. And what we're doing as an administration is not so much pushing people individually in terms of their choices, as we are acting to make it more affordable to have an EV, and acting to make sure that there are chargers around the country. And the other thing that's very important is we need to make sure that America wins the race for EV dominance. During the Trump administration, China was really able to get an advantage in EVs, which are such a big part of the future of the automotive industry. I want to make sure that those vehicles of the future and that technology of the future is made in America.
But do we have a setback then after the UAW strike? It sounds like the Biden administration and the president himself said, okay, side with the workers. And now we see Ford, Stellantis, GM all saying they're deferring or delaying investments in EVs and production, billions of dollars in delays. How big an impact is that?
Well, they're adjusting their production, but there's no going back. And I think that the workers were able to achieve something very important, which is basically to say, as these new technologies develop, we want to make sure that auto workers in the 21st century do just as well or better as they did in the 20th century. That's personal for me. I come from the industrial Midwest. My hometown of South Bend was home to Local 5 and Local 9. I saw the great middle-class incomes that were made possible by automotive jobs. But what I also saw that's on my mind in the EV debate is I saw what happens when a company falls apart because it can't innovate and keep up with the times. We can't let that happen again. We can't let America be left behind. We can't pretend that the old technologies will work in a new century with a new economy.
Okay, I'll let you go, but you have to answer this. You told us about this website, FlightRights.com. You said we could find out which airline would give us what.
FlightRights.gov, yeah.
FlightRights.gov. Okay, FlightRights.gov. So if we can go there and find out which airline is going to give us, hotels or reimbursements, what's the best airline?
We don't root for individual companies as long as they are following the rules. But anytime they don't, we'll be there to back up your passengers. So I guess I'm rooting for the passenger here. But you can find out for yourself. We report, you decide.
All right. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot. Take care.